Hello and welcome to Tools in the Shed, a podcast powered by CarsGuide, ready to rip into car stuff that has caught our eye this week. I'm James and with me is Crafty.
Hey.
And Richard.
Hello.
This week, we're looking at a potentially game-changing baby ute from Ford. We'll also discuss some of the fresh metal residing in the CarsGuide garage this week. And speaking of babies, we'll catch up with 2020's new Father of the Year in this week's MuskWatch. So stay with us. But first of all, some feedback from our last episode in which we talked about the 2021 Hilux. So a major upgrade update of the best-selling car in Australia anyway. And Mark Richards had a comment. Now, not the famous Novocastrian and, four-time world surfing champion. Although it might be. He might need a new rig,
Did you know Mark Richards? Mark Richards taught me to surf.
Oh, really?
Right. Okay, fantastic.
Not the surfer, but the guy who's written in.
That guy. Yeah. So he said any info or an update when the updated Toyota engine will be put in the Prado. And that was amazing timing because we actually ran a story yesterday that specifically, sadly, ruled that out. For Australia, that it's not happening. So that 2.8 litre turbo diesel that'll produce, we're theorising, 150 kilowatts, 470 newton meters will be a Hilux only proposition. So not for the Prado MR, and keep those wings flapping on the bottom turn when you're on the at pipeline.
Also, can I just add to that as well? It's very unlikely that we're going to see it in Hilux before Land Cruiser, aren't we? They'll debut it in Land Cruiser for sure.
Who knows? Don't know. Now, TGV, the very fast train, has Toyota fixed the fifth injector lockup for the DPF. So obviously Toyota had some problems with the diesel particulate filter. He says a manual regen is not a fix, which would continue. He's not happy with that. Also, they fixed the very poor torque converter auto, which is useless when towing, and downshifts at the slightest incline, and the air induction filter system yet. So apparently there were some dust intrusion issues around all of that. Or are they hoping for a midlife facelift to continue? To stay at number one, not a fan of, his words, not mine, this awful junk.
Wow.
So he's not a happy camper when it comes to the Hilux. But I know that's been an ongoing saga for Toyota. But at least by ventilating that TGV, hopefully you're feeling better. Now, he had another go, and he was pondering the van versus ute. We were talking about van and utes, which is the best proposition.
Yep.
He says, well, how about the classic panel van? Ford Falcon panel van, the Holden panel van. And whenever I think of those cars, I go straight to the 1970s or 80s with the big murals on the side, customised.
Sandman.
Yep.
You've got your Holden Sandman, you had your Ford Sundowner, and you actually had your Chrysler Valiant Drifter.
That's right.
They all got on the same bandwagon. And panel vans were the beginning, really, of the formalised custom car craze.
I don't think it's bandwagon. I think it's vanwagon.
Vanwagon. They got on the vanwagon together, and in fact, the very popular Street Machine magazine in Australia started out as van wheels.
That's right.
And kind of morphed into Street Machine because panel vans did the same thing. They were the custom cars, and then they kind of went out of favour, and on it went. So, look, I'm all for that. Bring back the panel van. Pity we don't make cars in Australia anymore. So if someone out there in the worldwide car universe could make a panel van, I'd be all for it.
Yeah. You named the big mobs then, like Ford and Holden, but for a short period of time in Bundaberg in Queensland, there was an independent, sort of custom fit out mob that did the panel vans, Shag and Wagon. They didn't last for too long.
Yes.
Because the name was somewhat controversial, but
despite your purchases, Crafty, I know you had several in a row.
Oh no, I bought the whole fleet. Yeah, so
you did. What you've got to be careful of, though, is if you're chasing one and you get your chain out and you swing it round and it hooks onto the roof racks, you're likely to lose your hand.
Yeah,
Love that. Love that. Love them. In fact, that was, I think, an HZ panel van with what looked like a WB front on it.
Yes.
Anyway, we're referring to Mad Max. People that aren't really with the train of thought.
Max, what a classic! We should have a podcast just about classic
Mad Max.
Yes. Yes.
Well, that's a good idea. We'll take that on board. Now, Richard De Cook, your mate, says. He says, when I heard John Schroeder's comment about Nissan being reduced to boring SUVs being re-engineered to become what he thinks are actually quite nice-looking Renault SUVs, I had a stroke of genius. Also fueled by your thoughts about right engine in right chassis, etc. Why not take the Alpine 110 chassis and use it to launch a new Silvia, which is an interesting idea. But Luke Holmes chimed in straight away and said, yeah, I thought that too. Problem is the A110 is mid-engine. So unless you find a way to put the tray on the other side of the engine and then the cab in the front, you've got something like whatever that front cab over Ford thing was in the US that was just
the Econovan type thing.
That kind of thing. That's what you'd probably be looking at. So thank you to Cook, but not really a goer. Then we got onto the whole 90s comeback thing because we were talking about the new Nissan Z car in previous episodes. And Neza says, I'm not sure about the 90s style of car design coming back so soon. It's probably too fresh in our minds. Yeah. He says, denim outfits. And I immediately went to Jay Leno and the double denim. He's a fiend for the double denim. Yeah. It seems cultural trends, clothes, media, TV shows, etc., are all pointed these days to the 80s. Yeah. There are kids in the States buying C3 Corvettes and customising to look period correct. I do hope this means the comeback of the Golf GTI convertible. Ha, ha, ha. But more importantly, the colours and futuristic interior styles. Now, he put a few names up. I did a bit of digging and found the cars and interiors that he was talking about. So he calls out the Renault 25, and you think about asymmetric steering wheel bosses and very angular kind of things like that. Renault 25. The Lamborghini Athon concept, which actually had a display, like a dash display, that you would swear was a current Mercedes-Benz. It's just this long screen. It looks exactly the same. He's dead right. The VW Orbit concept, which was just this hilarious little open roadster for 4 people. And, VW never put that into production. The Nissan QX concept, which was a luxury car, and he says it's pretty much every car now looks like the QX, which was 1985, and the Peugeot Quasar, which he equates to the 2020 Audi A7. So he thinks that's all coming around. He actually put a link in the comments on YouTube to a video, a little bit of which we'll have playing behind us for people on YouTube, of a C4 Corvette madly kind of stanced and doing the kind of around town cruise at night. But that C4 Corvette had that dashboard, the one that just lit up, had all of those digital instruments and the cumulative strip speedometer and rev counter and all of that stuff. So he's thinking that we now have the technology to make those things more reliable. And we should, if we're going to go to the 80s, maybe look at those and make them work properly in 2020.
Oh, geez. Look, as long as they don't... Look, I've got a story which is for another time, but basically I stole a C4 Corvette when it was parked out in front of my house. My dad was having a party and all his mates had these pretty hot cars, and I just grabbed the keys once and just drove it around, town.
Right.
And it was amazing. It was amazing. And they all knew because I arrived back in it. But as long as they don't bring a 90s Mustang back, I'll be happy because they were hideous.
Well, I do remember driving the C4 ZR1, so the original King of the Hill, 48-valve, quad-cam, Lotus-built or designed V8, and that dashboard, aside from the silly performance that thing had, that dashboard was incredible. It lit up like the proverbial Christmas tree. Sorry, Crafty, I think you were going to say something?
All of that is well and good, and it's lovely for you blokes to take a stroll down your posho memory lanes. Richard, when you got the keys, mate, was there a bowl full of keys? Was it one of your dad's?
It was like it was a business. It was a business meeting of the various directors of the company, and there was a range of cars parked in the driveway, and I was told if I wanted to.
Why is Daddy with that lady?
I've been to a couple of your dad's business meetings, mate, and I end up.
That's true. Yeah. Here you go, kid. Take the keys. Make yourself scarce.
That's right. Well, Luke Holmes came back to build on Nez's comment and said He wants to back him up, sees the Hyundai Venue Go reminds him of the Nissan Prairie.
Wow.
So the Prairie was a little upright kind of
Yeah.
one and a half box
Sort of
people
thing.
mover.
Yeah.
The gorgeous, he says, the
guess.
gorgeous tiny geometric wheels, the boxy upright shape, and the grid front grille are all the same. You could drive one straight into Radwood, and Radwood is a kind of 80s focused car show circuit in the States, and no one would notice that it was 30 years too young. So he sees it very much as an 80s car anyway.
Wow.
Yep, that and the Nimbus as well, the
Nimbus.
original people movers.
Nimbus.
Yeah.
That's you're absolutely right. That is a quintessentially 80s car, the Nimbus.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Now, then we moved on to the Skoda Kodiaq RS because Chesto and Mal were in the podcast last week. Chesto had driven the car, so had Mal. So there was a bit of to and fro about that one. All positive, by the way. Both of them really enjoyed the car. And David Burt kicked off with a very lovely keep up the good work, team. Thank you, David. But then he says the RS is far from RS, and that's Australian, a colloquialism that Aussies will understand. He says it looks great, but his only concern is around the price, that it's nearly $66,000 before you've put it on the road. And he always thought Skoda was the kind of thinking person's, I'm going to buy the function, not the badge, and it has all of that VW Group tech, but you pay a lesser price. So he's thinking, what's the difference now? That's a very expensive Skoda, and you can probably get Volkswagen alternatives like a Tiguan 162 R-Line for a little less money than that Skoda. So I think it's a fair question.
I've always wondered about that because up until about 5 years ago, Skoda was the more affordable version of previous generation Volkswagen. But now I think the thinking might be is that people are buying Skodas in their own right so they can bring the price up. And I think that's true. Yeah, no, they're a good car.
I've always liked the Skoda. I see Skoda buyers as the modern Saab buyers.
Yeah.
That they're after something European. They're after something with really clever and innovative engineering. But they don't want to go down the mainstream path. They'd like something that's a little bit left of centre.
Yeah. Although we've got the cursed Skoda in our household, which is we've had it for 6 months and it's already had 4
It's essentially a crash test vehicle. It's sponsored by ANCAP, isn't it?
I think the best crash we've had in it so far was we weren't in the car at all, and it was when my wife was waiting for her Uber out the front of our house, and the Uber driver appeared on the other side of the road. She's gone, I'm going that way, and he's like, I'll just turn round, and he's done a U-turn, and he's smashed in the side of her car.
Into the car.
Into the Skoda. Yeah.
Well, look, that's David Burt finishes off by saying that he's actually going to probably go for the Tiguan top model due to the better resale. He says, as a salt and pepper nomad, a retiree in his late 50s, he's touring around. I'd say he's more of a grey fox, I reckon.
I bet he's got a moustache. I bet
he's a
got
Clooney-style grey
Yes.
hair anyway.
Yeah.
But Michael McLeaf said, seriously? Skoda and Audi used in the same sentence? And he's in Arizona, and he occasionally sees prototype cars getting around doing hot weather testing, I presume, in Arizona.
Send us pics.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yep.
And he says, he saw the first one a few years ago because they're all at the proving grounds around Arizona. It was behind a dirty white thing at a stoplight and thought, what the hell's a Yeti? Because it's not on sale in the American market. He's researched the brand a bit, thought it was a cheap VW. It's the brand with the umbrella, again, worthless in Arizona. It doesn't really rain there very much. And an ice scraper, don't need the ice scraper. But he does like the old ads, and he put a link, and I had a look at it. It's funny. So we've got some of that vision up behind us. I think it was for an early Octavia. And there's a person being taken for a test drive by obviously the dealer salesperson, and they're talking about he's liking it. And they say, well, he said, I'll pull into this lay-by and we can swap over and you can drive us back to the dealership. So they swap over, and as they swap, the guy who's loving the car bolts through the bushes and across the little paddock next to it because he's scared that he's starting to like a Skoda. Yeah. And they actually say, I think the positioning line is something like, don't worry, you'll love it, or whatever it is. But it is a very good ad.
The ads, look, even today, the ads for Skoda are fantastic. Like, if you haven't seen the Kodiaq one, go onto YouTube and check that out. And the Karoq one's really good as well. They're amazing.
Well, Luke Holmes came in for his third comment and said that he'd seen Audi and Skoda in the same thought. He must have been at a social gathering somewhere, and someone was saying that they had a Kodiaq, but they were effectively driving a Q7. And he said the nerd in him wanted to correct them and say, well, actually, it's a Q5. But he kept his lip buttoned. I totally would have gone in and told them it was a Q5. I've got to say. I wouldn't have been able to resist. But anyway, good on you, Luke. Now, just under the heading of general commentary, we've got Wax 333 from across the ditch. Something I'd like to know or see is how car brands decide which features or engines, etc., should be specified for vehicles for our markets, and that's Australia and New Zealand. More or less how they come to choose what we get on our vehicles. It seems a lot of the vehicles we get in Australia and New Zealand have more blank switches in our cars than before. He's noticing that, nothing says you're in a poverty model more than blanks where the switches should go for other equipment.
Yep.
That was my whole childhood, actually, because we, despite the key party, we were a fairly, poor family. So we got new cars, but they were always the base model. So they were just, my whole childhood is just blank panels, wondering what might be there. Yeah.
And did you naively kind of point this out to your mother or father, and they kind of felt the pain as what goes there, Dad? What goes there?
I kind of felt their pain as well. So it was never brought up.
Right.
It was never brought up.
Well, it's funny because you've got to say that typically Australia seems to have a slightly higher specification than a lot of other markets. We're willing to pay a bit of a premium for a few more features, although it does get pretty cutthroat down at the entry part of the new car market. But it's such an incredibly complex thing, product planning. If you think about it too long, it just does your head in. As to predicting it, there's a lot of crystal ball in it. There's some looking back, but then a lot about trying to guess what people are going to want, informed by that. So, look, I don't know. I'm not the expert in that area. It's just a very complicated process, Waxy. Now, Luke Holmes came in with comment number 4, and he said, are M4 and Mal related? Since the Zoom sessions, I can't tell which one I'm listening to when listening to the audio. Wow. I had never thought in a million years that their voices would be mistaken for one another.
I mean, I've never thought that they sound the same. I mean,
as far as I know, they're not related. They may have grown up in the same household. I don't know, but I don't think they are blood related.
Do we need to do a DNA test?
A DNA test.
Like that? I think we do. We need to get onto Ancestry or someone and do a DNA test and find out what's going on.
Yeah. We need to ask serious questions of their parents. I mean,
we do.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, we'll get that sorted for the next podcast, and we'll clear it up for Luke.
Both sets of parents might have been at one of Richard's dad's.
Yeah, that would explain it.
Now, final comment is Ted. Who I like to call Big Ted, and that's a play school reference for people of a certain age or people who have kids. He just says, loved it after last week's podcast. Loved it. So fantastic. Thank you very much, Ted. And that's a nice positive note on which to end the feedback. Thank you for all of it. Now, we're going to move on to our main subject of discussion, and this is some detective work that our own Andrew Chesterton has done. And he's unearthed a few more clues around what looks to be upcoming in terms of a smaller Ford Ute. And by that, I mean sub-Ranger-sized Ute. And there's so much residual kind of love for cars like, for small Utes in Australia, and I'm sure in other markets. Ford must be tapping into that. And he's gone to an outlet called the Fast Lane Truck. And they have managed, from anonymous sources, to capture a CAD drawing of a tailgate for a thing that's called Maverick. So this could well be the focus-based Ute that we've been hearing and writing so much about just of late.
Oh yeah. It's exciting, whatever it is. I mean, that you've seen that drawing. It is very basic. It looks a bit like a child scribbling.
It looks like something I'd do.
Yeah, exactly. But you've got to be excited. I mean, any of that sort of stuff, and it looks good. And they do a good Ute, it must be said. Ford. The Maverick, as I understand, it was a sedan or something, wasn't it, from the 60s or 70s?
I think it was a compact. Also, don't forget that it was a rebadged Nissan Patrol
Yes, it
in
was.
Australia in the late 1980s and
wow.
early 90s.
Oh, there you go. Wow.
The wonderful Ford Maverick of that era.
And as we mentioned earlier, like the only other thing that I've seen of note, of substance about this thing is that supposed spy shot of it, the dressed up. But I mean, you can tell what's underneath. Looks good. It is a compact. It is a compact ute, a pickup truck, as the Yanks call it. But
because it'll be a Santa Cruz rival. So all of a sudden, you can just sense this little sub niche emerging, probably out of California mainly, that wants that kind of lifestyle. Far from a hardcore vehicle, it's a ute that informs your active lifestyle. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right. I think because in the United States they've got the F trucks, so you got the F-150s and 250s and 350s, and they go stratospheric and they get huge.
F650, Julie. Yeah,
they're enormous, and they've also got the Ranger on sale. So like our Ranger Ute as well.
Yep.
But what is missing is something which is smaller, because even though our Ranger Ute is not big by American standards, it's still as a daily driver in a family car, it might be still a bit impractical. But like a Ford Focus-based Ute would. It wouldn't have the same sort of payload capacity or towing capacity, but it would be a good recreational ute.
Yeah.
Well, if you had your F650, you need something like a dinghy to hang off the back. When you've berthed the mothership, you need something nimble to get around town.
Have you guys? We'll probably put a picture up now, but the spy shots of a canopy covered pickup. Now, my theory is that the pickup is a red herring. It's not a pickup at all. If you have a look at that canopy, I reckon that canopy is real. That's the shape of it.
That's the shape of the vehicle.
Actually, it's going to be a panel van. They're going to bring back the panel van, and it's going to have barn doors on the back. That's my theory.
That spy shot though is funny because it looks like one of those comedy movies where someone drove through someone else's tent and the tent stayed on the back of it. Goes through, like,
TGV will be happy that the panel van's coming back.
He will. He will.
I reckon you're spot on though, JC. I reckon that is a whole sort of barely tapped niche of the market at the moment. That lifestyle sort of ute. It'll go mental in the US and here. I reckon a lot of it.
Well, in Australia, the Subaru Brumby was a little ute that found huge favour with everyone from cowcockies to people in urban areas. The Proton, I want to say Jumbuck, was also very popular. And this thing will probably have the 2-litre EcoBoost engine. Yeah. And I'm thinking, why not put the Mustang's 2.3-litre EcoBoost in it and make a performance version? I reckon that'd be fantastic.
I've got something controversial for you. It's not coming to Australia.
What?
It won't come to Australia.
Okay, and what's
I don't think because we did a podcast on this a couple of months ago on the Ford Focus-based Ute, and I sent the blokes at Ford an email and just said, look, what do you think? And they were very, very, very guarded as to what they said, and they sent a cryptic email saying, look, it might not measure up. Right, we're sort of determining whether something like this is going to be. I deduced from that they're determining whether it's going to fit our market. So Ford Australia might think it might be too small for us.
I think their guarded approach was nothing to do with the vehicle, Richard. I think it was all about you. That's just their standard operating procedure.
I think you're right, because I asked another question that was the same answer again. So it was nothing to do with the Ute. They
just pull out the file that says Richard Berry. Yeah. Here's our
reply
script.
with
this is how you respond to this bloke.
Right. It's really about me.
You asked them to meet you for a beer, and they said no comment.
Not coming to this market. It's not coming to this market. But funnily enough, in Chesto's story about this very subject, he said that in late 2019 in Detroit, Jim Farley, who's the Vice President of Marketing and Sales for Ford globally, said we're investing in more affordable versions of our truck business. So there seemed little doubt that this is something that Ford is focusing on. And as a follow-up, Ford Australia's previously told us that it's studying the business case for a potential Australian launch. So it's interesting, Richard, that you got that feedback, but they actually pointed to Mustang as proof that they're able to do a kind of niche model, but actually make it very successful. So, I think the chances are looking pretty good.
Oh, I'd like to see it, definitely. Crafty, you're sort of off-road ute expert. Who's going to buy this? Like, who do you think is going to be marketed for this?
It's going to appeal. And again, it's that lifestyle sort of thing, that active wear. That whether you're pretending to go on grand adventures off-road and stuff, or whether you actually do, it's like Jeep owners, like someone with a Wrangler or a Wrangler Rubicon. Very capable vehicle, very, very able to, throw in all your gear, ski gear, whatever, wakeboards, whatever. Some people use them for that sort of stuff. Maybe some people don't, but they still look great, and they're still real easy to drive around cities.
You know what I think of when you make that comment, Crafty, is when you're in a traffic jam and it's obvious that something pretty bad's happened up ahead and you're going to be stuck in traffic for some time. The first person to crack, the first person to go, all right, I'm going to do the U-turn and go off, is invariably someone in a four-wheel drive. And they go across the median strip and you can just read their mind. They're saying, there you go. That's why you have a four-wheel drive, right? Thank God we got this.
Just paid for itself. I'm looking at these spy shots though, and I'm looking at the ground clearance of this prototype or this mule or whatever it is that they've got photos of here. And it looks like it's got a ground clearance of about, 150 mils. So I don't really, it's less than a Ford Escape. So I just don't think that this is going to be any way off-road capable. It's possibly only going to be front-wheel drive. It could,
and that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
We used to sort of semi-disparagingly refer to some things as soft roaders. So maybe that's the intent, is that it just goes on formed gravel trails, and that's it.
Doesn't it open up the kind of broader discussion, which is most car purchases, unless it's for some very specific use, has a large degree of emotion in it. You are choosing the car because you're emotionally attaching yourself to it. So it's a bit how SUVs kicked off because people didn't want to buy wagons that said, oh, we're a daggy family, or they didn't want to buy necessarily people movers because that was a bit daggy too. We're going to get a four-wheel drive, and that'll say we've still got it. We're out there, we're doing the camping, we're probably putting the boat on the back. We are an active with it family. And there's the same goes here, that it's a car that just says, I'm still got it. I'm hip and happening,
But correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the whole purpose of owning a ute being offensive and big and loud and obnoxious?
All right. Well, you could buy your small ute and just put truck nuts on the tow bar or something.
Seriously, I don't know. I reckon if anyone parked this in my neighbourhood, they'd arrive back and it'd be covered in eggs. Right, worse things. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we could go on about your neighbourhood, Richard, but I think the vehicle itself would find favour. To your question, it's got to be for younger people that do occasionally want to throw stuff in the back. It's an alternative to a conventional van ute that was built by Ford and Holden and whatever.
Well, just to give you an indication, there's bars on my window just here. That's my neighbourhood. So.
And razor wire along the top of the fence. Yeah.
You are still all right. You are still in minimum security, aren't you? I mean,
minimum. I'm allowed to go out at midday and just go for exercise. It's fine. I have to go to the shops. I need to have a person walk behind me to make sure I don't leg it.
With that ankle thing.
It's a bracelet. He's got a radius of about 20 meters.
The chafing on that's incredible.
All right. Well, that's the Ford Maverick, the baby ute. It's exciting. Let's hope it comes to Australia. I reckon it'd be a success, as you say, Crafty. But we're going to move to cars in our garage here and now. And Richard, you've been in something large with multiple seats, and it's not the first time you've been there.
No. So I have been driving a Toyota Granvia VX this week. It's big, it's black, but it doesn't have as many seats as the one I drove a couple of months ago. I drove the 8-seater a couple of months ago. We made a pretty different video where we drove around Sydney streets and tried to get people to get into it and drive them to work, and it actually worked. So that's on YouTube if you want to see it as well.
Which is something you do regularly. It's just this time we videoed it.
I do. I normally don't have a reason for it, but I did this time. I drove the 6-seater this time, and I wanted to see if it was going to be a little bit more practical, because one of the issues that we had with the 8-seater is that bench seat back row basically was your boot space. So if you had it filled up with 8 people, you basically only had enough room for, a carton of Weet-Bix in the back. So a 6-seater does free up space.
What sort of Weet-Bix though, Richard? There's like an economy box, and then the large one. Then you get down to your more.
Oh, the family. I'm the family 33% extra type. But it's still only that much room, really.
Yeah. I'm just trying to visualize,
Yeah. So because what I wanted to know was what would be the function of this car? What would it be used for? And I thought, well, maybe it's a high-end car. Toyota is saying that it's a replacement for the Toyota Tarago, which it really isn't, because it's not small enough to be a family car, really, and it's also not practical enough to be a family car either. So what is it? It's an airport shuttle, but then it doesn't really cut the mustard as an airport shuttle either, because with 8 seats in it, there's no room for for luggage. Yes, you could have a trailer on the back of it, but
and no one's flying anywhere right now.
No, that's exactly right. I know where they've kept all the taxis too, by the way, but that's a different story.
Wow.
Anyway, so the 6-seater, basically it's just been myself and my son who wanted to sit in the furthest seat possible, right?
That makes sense.
My 5-year-old son, I set up his car seat really far down there, but that was diabolical, because he kept as a parent, you realize you really want your kid's arm reach away.
Yeah.
And at one point,
to just give them a quick backhander, Richard. It's 2020.
Yeah. At one point, I'm sitting at the traffic lights, and he's just walked up beside me. So he'd taken off his seatbelt and just wandered up. And I'm sitting there at the lights, and I've gone, oh, hello, whoa, right? So that's an issue. Do not put your children in the back seat of an enormous van, because they'll just wander about, right? So that was quickly fixed, that situation. But look, one of the issues that I had with it as well is that having driven a Mercedes V250 V-Class van as well, the packaging of those cars is just so clever. And there's just no sort of storage sort of capabilities like that with the Granvia VX either. Yes, you do have more space because there's no bench seat at the back there, but at the same time, it's just this space that things can roll around. The V-Class has got storage crates and little nooks and crannies and opening and shutting boxes and stuff like that, which is really good. One of the things I did like about the Granvia VX, though, was the way it drove. A 2.8 litre diesel, 130 kilowatts, 450 newton meters. It's the same 2.8 litre diesel, which is famous for the diesel particulate filter. It's got a burn-off switch, but it's smooth, it's quiet, it's responsive, and like most vans, they're really fun to drive. They've got really good turning circles because they can basically turn on a dime. The visibility is great. I enjoyed it a lot. And the fuel economy that I got, I did a fuel test yesterday, and I drove 100 kilometers and 900 meters. And the fuel results I got out of it were quite interesting. They were a bit different to the 8-seater that I drove a couple of months ago. So that review's coming out soon, and you'll be able to read it there.
So Richard, is there a sliding door on both sides of that?
Yes.
Of that vehicle? And is it 2 in the front?
Yep.
And then where do you go from there? Like 3 and then?
No, so it's 2, 2, 2.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and the 4 seats in the back are all the captain's chairs, and they're uber comfortable.
Right.
They fold back. They've got ottomans which come out. The headrests themselves, when you take them out, they're like super heavy. It's an incredibly plush people mover. I think the type of people, though, that you're going to be moving are not children that can just get out of their seats. I think it's going to be, executives. I think you're going to be moving people from airports to hotels and that type of stuff.
And when you stopped, can either or all of the seats rotate so you face one another, or they're fixed in the straight ahead kind of position?
They are fixed in the straight ahead position, and they are on track. So what you can do, because it was also used to pick up some flat pack
take the middle ones out
items as well.
Yeah.
Well, we can't. I was terrified of taking the seats out altogether and not be able to get them back in again. But you can slide them all the way up, and then that opens up your storage space.
Gotcha.
Quite dramatically.
Brilliant.
But a really comfortable van, really long wheelbase, so the ride is absolutely supreme. It feels like a limo. And it's really easy to steer. So I drove it basically from the centre of Sydney on George Street all the way to Campbelltown to get motorways and traffic sort of as well. And in the city, it was just absolutely a breeze to drive. And on the highway at 110, it just cruised along perfectly. But it's a really good van.
The question remains where it finds favour. Who's going to choose it? It may do things nicely, but its purpose seems a little bit grey. You know, who's going to buy it?
It's not a family car. It's the quality interior is actually too nice for a family. Like those, you'll see in the images. Those cream seats are going to get. When I handed it back, there was already a mark on it that I was a bit dubious about. Like, what is that?
Right.
So,
well, we won't go into that.
We're not going to go there. It was on my seat, I've got to admit, but but it's definitely not. It's going to be rivaling, a V250D and that type of thing as an executive, people mover. Really, I think.
All right, brilliant. Well, speaking of moving people in an executive style. Crafty, you've been in a very high-end vehicle, but it's not meant for the road. Tell us what you've been driving.
It was a Lexus. Well, it still is a Lexus.
It was a Lexus. Is it like Richard's cursed Skoda?
A Lexus LX570. Now,
Whoa,
you know me, I don't really get the keys to posho things often. I don't know. I don't think I'm trusted. No, it's not that. It's just because I spend most of my time in things that you guys wouldn't even turn your nose up at, like utes and stuff.
What, like your house?
That's it, yeah. Well, the minimum security prison behind Richard.
That's right.
Anyway, so this thing, it's more than 160 grand, and it's got everything in it. And it's unreal. Ride and handling is nice for such a big unit. It's a little over 5 meters long. So it looks really good. Like it's a blinged out sort of, massive blinged out SUV. But the thing is, I reckon a lot of people forget, and they don't buy them for four-wheel driving, effectively. I'm sure they buy them to move their mobs around and look good and whatever else. But I took it on some very sort of severe stuff. A few things I had to reverse out of because I was just concerned about sustaining some damage, and I didn't want it, obviously. Not unless JC's wage.
I thought you were more concerned about the people that you discovered in the road that you went down and just had to select reverse and get out of there.
Exactly. Yeah, that too. But very capable. I mean, it's essentially a Land Cruiser, 200 series Land Cruiser underneath. I mean, if you get down to the nuts and bolts of it. Very capable off-road. You've got air suspension as well. All those sort of little bits and pieces. Some people might think of it as a little bit of frippery, but it all comes in handy to help you out. It did have the big wheels, though. Those things are the only sort of real chink in the armour, like having big rims, big 21-inch, low-profile tyres, road-biased tyres. They're no help. So a couple of times on things that I'd otherwise get over, I had to reverse out. But the tyres and the wheels are and their real weakness. And the dimensions, like you've got to drive to suit the dimensions. But otherwise, great
it's surprising fun. Though, I had a fellow come up and put me in a headlock one time and tell me that he bought a G63 Merc AMG partly because he'd seen my review of the car.
Yeah.
Wow. And he was on a property somewhere in Western or mid New South Wales, and he used it occasionally pretty hard off-road circumstances, which was a surprise. So it does happen occasionally, I suppose.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask. Like, how often is an LX570 used in the same way that a Land Cruiser would be? Like, you don't ever see them on the Udinadatta track, do you?
Touareg tractor, yeah.
And there's a little spot just near my place, in the bush, and the only vehicles I've ever seen there have been modified vehicles. So
yeah.
Heavily modified Rubicon. While I was there was a heavily modified Hilux and a Patrol. By heavily modified, Crafty, do you mean the wheels were missing? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and they were burnt out. I mean,
that's right.
Yes, that's very modified.
All right, well, that's interesting. I suppose it's one of those things where you know that the underpinnings have got the capability. Whether you're going to use it on a regular basis is the question, but it's there.
Yeah, and otherwise that thing is really nice to drive. I mean, the assumption would be, and it'd be fair enough, that it'd feel like a bit of a tank and whatever else and wallow around. But it's pretty well reined in, and I enjoyed it.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I'll quickly jump in with the car that I was in, which was another Lexus, but this time it's the LS. So it's the sedan, the kind of flagship sedan, the LS500. And strangely, the F-Sport. So this is a big car with the F-Sport package to make it kind of a performance, have a slight performance edge to its personality. Now, it's about $190,000. So by the time it's on the road, it's sailed over $200,000. It's a 3.5 litre twin turbo V6 with a 10-speed auto. And talk about loaded, it's got all the fruit in the greengrocer's shop. You know, it's just got all of the equipment that you could ever dream of. About 310 kilowatts, which is plenty, and 600 newton meters of torque. And it just is lift-off time if you really want to push that car along. And in the plus column, I had that torque and acceleration is really, it's tempting. Every time you want to kind of sink your right foot into that, it is very tempting. But the ride is amazing. The ride is just so incredibly good. It soaks up everything from those tiny little high-frequency bumps to the larger kind of dips and potholes and things incredibly well. It exudes high quality. I mean, Lexus obviously makes its reputation on putting things together well and designing them well in the first place. So it's got all that and just oodles of room inside the car. It's a limo, really. So in the back particularly, you've just got so much space. One little thing I like is that Lexus has this two-way storage box between the front seats. So there's a release on both sides of the lid of that sort of armrest box. So you can open it and the passenger can open it. Rather than it tilting backwards, it just opens whichever side you like. I think it's genius. Why doesn't everybody do it? It's just the best way to do it.
JC, if the passenger and you at the same time released it, does the whole lid come off?
The car starts to fall apart the moment you do that. You've started a domino chain reaction effect that could end anywhere. The thing is, it's 2.24 tons, so it is a heavy vehicle, and you do feel that when you're driving it. You know that you're in a pretty big beast. And ironically, given it's got so much legroom in the back, the tow room under the front seats is really limited. So you find yourself thinking, I've got plenty of legroom, but I'd love to put my feet just a bit further forward, which is a little bit odd. And of course, the most hateful thing about most Lexuses these days is the remote touch interface, that pad that you access the media system and various other things with. It is such a failure. And Lexus should really suck it up and get rid of it. It's terrible.
The weird toggle thing? Because I had problems with that in the LX570 as well.
Not so much a toggle. It's a square sort of mat with you use it like a finger pad on a laptop. But it's overreactive. You can adjust the settings, but no matter what settings you put in there, it is just so very ordinary.
One of the ways that Lexus has sort of tried to get around that issue is by making that screen touchscreen now as well. But I find that it's so far away. You have to lean forward, because a Lexus dash is elaborate and it's all built in and deep. To try and reach that screen, you've got to have arms
or a little baton or something, or some little
gadget,
a drumstick just to touch it with. Anyway, so
like a chicken drumstick.
But look, on the face of it, it does seem counterintuitive that you've got this big, 2.2 ton limo that you put F-Sport on and try and, but it is enjoyable to drive and it's incredibly comfortable. It just helps you relax. It's a very relaxing drive. But if you do start to push it along, it responds pretty well. You just know that you're in a fairly hefty car. The dynamics are such. But enjoyable nonetheless. And look, speaking of enjoyable, it's time for MuskWatch.
MuskWatch.
We're going to start off the big news of the week with Elon Musk and his significant other, Grimes, a pop artiste, that they have welcomed a baby boy, which, according to reports, and I don't know whether it's 6 or 7, but this is Elon Musk's either 6th or 7th son that he has been the father of. And they've named it. The name for this little boy, sadly, is XIA-12 Musk. Yeah. Right? So I'm going to pronounce that XIA-12 Musk. And Grimes on social media explained this name and said that X is just X. It's the unknown variable. So they don't know what's coming. The AE kind of jammed together is her elven spelling of AI or I, which resembles the Chinese word for love. And, of course, artificial intelligence. So the A12 is named after the Lockheed A12, which was a high-speed, Cold War, high-altitude observation aircraft.
The Archangel, right?
It's a precursor to the SR-71, the one that everyone knows, the Blackbird. And so it was capable of Mach 3.1, so a bit over 3 times the speed of sound. It could go at 85,000 feet. And so Grimes said on social media, that's her favourite aircraft. No weapons, no defences, just speed. So, and it was part of, you're right, Richard, it was part of this project called Archangel, and that was the internal code name. And Grimes' favourite album is called Art Angel, so apparently there's a bit of alignment there as well. So just very weird.
They are the biggest nerds, aren't they?
Cyberbunny on Twitter, Cyberbunny 16-bit TRK, came back with, don't worry, we won't tell anyone. And we've got the meme playing behind us for those on YouTube. And it's the baby in the little casket and someone peeling its face off, and there is, in fact, an alien behind that face. But Lad Bible says that California law will prevent them from actually going forward with this name because it features things outside the alphabet. That California law says you can only use the 26 characters of the English language. So no Roman numerals, no accents, umlauts, or other symbols or emojis.
Well, how did Prince change his name to a symbol then?
Well, I'm sure he wasn't in California.
Yeah,
so anyway, it'll be interesting to see if they get away with it. I just know he'll cop hell in roll call.
Have you seen that latest photo? I saw it this morning. It's Friday morning at the moment. But Elon Musk holding the baby, and it's wearing a little SpaceX visor over its head. I don't know whether it's... I'm hoping it's photoshopped because you can see the baby's face through it, but I don't think it is photoshopped. Knowing Elon, I think he's actually put this little helmet on the baby. Anyway.
Yeah, unless they have him homeschooled, I think he's in for a hard time when he gets to school for all kinds of reasons. Anyway,
yes.
Elon also retweeted the always hilarious May the 4th be with you hashtag that came from SpaceX this time around. And they posted a picture of a rocket exhaust trail from a liftoff looking like a lightsaber. Okay, so there's all that nerdiness going on. But I noticed his retweet was actually on May the 5th. So he missed it by a day, He was probably in hospital where you do lose track of time when these babies are arriving, as I think all of us know. But the nerds came out in force in response to this whole thing. You had Spock, live long and prosper and all that stuff. Dancing stormtroopers, Baby Yoda. But then a link to the SpaceX Flickr page, and the pics there are amazing. You should actually have a look at their images. It's really close-up shots of rocket motors lighting up at the point of liftoff. Incredible imagery I would recommend that people go to SpaceX's Flickr page and have a look.
Wow.
We've got some of them up in the background for people on YouTube. Unbelievable. Another tweet to finish on, he said, wishing good vibes for all in second half 2020. All right, obviously referring to difficult times in the first part of this year. And several people commented and said, so you've given up on the first half already? You know, we haven't even finished the first half yet. But Regina P said, 2020 in one sentence, a roll of toilet paper is worth more than a barrel of oil. And in response to that, Boris said, soon more than Tesla stocks too.
Oh.
And which I thought was a bit cheeky. But it does lead us to the share price, which is $780. So it was $781 last week. So it stayed pretty much static on the face of it. But actually, just after we finished the podcast last week, Elon tweeted, I'm selling almost all physical possessions. I will own no house. Just one stipulation on sale. I own Gene Wilder's old house. It cannot be torn down or lose any of its soul. Right? So he's selling everything off. But then he tweeted, Tesla's stock price is too high, in my opinion. And the stock immediately fell 10%. And you might remember that he actually had a set to with the Securities and Exchange Commission when he tweeted taking the company private at $480 a share. And they instituted this system. He copped a big fine and a massive rap over the knuckles. And they instituted this fine where his tweets had to be vetted before he sent them so that any that might have an impact on the stock price for the company would be managed in that way. So he's clearly not having these tweets vetted. I think it's going to cause him a problem. And the Wall Street Journal actually asked him if he was joking about, it being too high as an opinion. And he came back by email saying no. So he had gone out there, and they also asked him if it had been vetted, and he said no. So I think he could be in trouble again. He cannot help himself with this Twitter thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like a Trump situation as well, isn't it? Like
put down the phone. Put down the phone, Elon. But the most recent results, it's now been a 6-month and 30-day market cap exceeding $100 billion. So he's picked up $700 million worth of shares at the current price. This is the first tranche of a $55 billion compensation package. So that's what he had to do to get to base camp, with 6-month, 30-day market cap in excess of $100 billion. So he just scored $700 million worth of shares.
Right. Wow.
Unbelievable. Just astronomical kind of money for, anyway. Now, that, I think, marks the point at which we have reached the finish line. And I want to say thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
And thank you, Crafty.
No, thank you.
And thanks to our digital dissemination officer, Mr. Pritchard, for his cool, calm and collected production wizardry. Today, he's in his, all this being such a legend is quite tiring t-shirt, detachable jeans and cowboy boot sandals.
Wow.
Arresting, a very arresting look. Please pass on the word about the podcast and let us know your thoughts by searching for CarsGuide on Facebook and Instagram using the hashtag CGPodcast, or email us at comments@carsguide.com.au. Feel free to do that.
Oh, yeah.
If you're an iTunes listener, please rate and review us. And remember, you can watch us on YouTube. But before we go, cleaned out the garage with one of the kids the other day. Took hours to get the cobwebs out of his hair.
That was quite good.
There you go. Yeah, in fact, it's true.
Good stuff. Hooroo.
There you go.